you know, I've always felt that artists have a huge responsibility because the culture looks at them as a way of interpreting what's going on, you know. So I think it's important for artists to be redeeming, offer things that are redeeming, things that are going to lift people, encourage them. So you do have to be careful with what you say and what the material is, because there's a lot of material out there that bleeds violence. Just about every project I've done, you know, people say, I feel your spirit, which I think artists want to be told that, you know, they want people to be moved generally, and moved, changed. You know, I like to think that regardless of how you come into the concert hall at the beginning, you know, how you came in, that you'll leave differently. You know, I think that's part of my job description as an artist, is moving people to make important changes in their life. You know, if you came in mad, you'll leave. You know, if you came in angry, you leave forgiving. You know, if you came in bitter, you'll leave mercifully. You know, or whatever. You know, one of the best compliments I think I ever had in my entire career was a woman standing up in the audience and saying, you know, I feel so good now, thank you, you know. And I just thought that was great. You know, I'm not so much into people being wowed over my technique or what I can do, stuff like that. That's just a vehicle for me. That's just a vehicle for my spirit. If there's any one thing I want, it's for people to have or to feel that sense of joy. The joy that I feel just being able to sing, you know, and getting a room full of strangers to sing together. What a joyful experience that is for me. I love it. I don't like to use the word performance or call myself a performer. I like to think of myself simply as a singer who likes to hang out and have a party, a musical feast of some kind. My mother knew all about this when I was very young. She knew how music was a healing balm. Because whenever I was sick, she'd give me two things. She'd give me medicine for my aches and pains, and she'd give me music for my spirit. You know, I had a bed that had, you know, those headboards, and I had a radio. And so she'd turn on the radio, or she'd tell me to turn it on to the classical stations. So I'd listen to classical music, listen to Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, whoever, while the medicine was working, so I wouldn't feel so miserable. It would distract me from thinking about how badly I felt. And it always worked. There have been times when I might walk on stage not in the best of moods, or even ill. There have been times when I've walked on stage ill, not thinking that I could actually go on and do my performance, and 90 minutes later walk off stage well. Music does have incredible power to rearrange your insides, you know, rearrange your thoughts, heal your body. Well, my favorite book in the Bible is the Psalms, which is the songbook. I spend a lot of time there. Sometimes I sing through them. Many times if I'm trying to memorize a verse in the Bible, I'll make up a song so that I don't forget it. You know, that's what I did with Don't Worry, Be Happy, you know, and some of the things that I did on an album called Medicine Music. You know, a lot of those things, as I was working on scriptures to memorize, I would make up a song out of it so I wouldn't forget. I do this form of singing called circle singing, and I do workshops and teach it, and it's very, very simple because I think it's very natural, where you get your singers in a circle and you have sometimes, well, most of the time I have them in parts, basses together, tenors together, altos, sopranos. The leader stands on the circle and simply starts to improvise, comes up with a part that he thinks that maybe the altos or sopranos or tenors or basses could sing, and then they hold that part. The leader gives the part to a certain group, and then they hold it, and then finds other parts. And so the leader assigns different parts to the whole group. And I tell you, after singing that way for 15, 20, 30, 60 minutes, while different leaders come in and change parts and rearrange them so the singing doesn't stop. It's a very uplifting experience. I don't know what it is, but it really does empower you. There's a sense of empowerment when you're done. In San Francisco, where I lived for 15 years, we used to do this thing called Singing for Your Life at Grace Cathedral, and we would circle sing for 24 hours on New Year's Eve. 24 hours of non-stop singing. Of course, they had to keep replenishing the singers. You know, you'd sign up for singing from 1 to 3 in the morning. You know, everybody would do a 2-hour slot, starting at 6 p.m. December 31st, and ending on 6 p.m. January 1st, or maybe it was December 30th to December 31st, something like that. Very powerful, just in the sense of how you felt afterwards, as if something in your body and your mind had been opened, you know. It's kind of hard to describe, but you could feel it in your body. I remember the first time I heard Miles Davis's band play. I left the club feeling molecularly changed, you know. There was something different about me physically that I could actually feel, and I felt that way for 2 weeks, I think. You know, there was this lightness of being, this radiance that was coming out of my eyes and my head and my feet and my hands. Just something physically had changed in me because I was so connected to the music and so understood spiritually what Miles was trying to say. You know, like when you walk into a foreign country and you don't understand what anyone is saying, but then you hear somebody speaking your language and you immediately gravitate to them, and all of a sudden you become the best of friends because you're speaking with somebody who can understand you. And it was the same way when I heard Miles play. It's the same thing that happens lots of times for people who are doing some circle singing for the first time. They identify with the language. It's something they've always wanted to do. They've been afraid to step out on the ledge, you know, or improvise, and all of a sudden they've been given a form or a basis to be able to just express themselves. You know, you've got 20 people speaking your language. You finally fit in. You have this sense of belonging. Music is so broad. It elicits so many emotions. Have you ever listened to a piece of music and for some reason which you just can't understand, you simply burst into tears? You know, I've experienced that. You know, I hear something and I just bawl because it's just so moving. Music has a way of communicating in a way that language does not. It can go past language, you know. I do interviews, and many times I get stuck to find the right word. And even if I find a word that works, sometimes I feel that it's still not the right word. It might be 90% there, but it's not 100% there. Music has a way of being 100% there all the time. You know, even when I make mistakes on stage, I might find myself wanting to go to the left and all of a sudden I find myself going to the right, or something, I trip over something, you know, in my improvs and I fall to the ground. But still, that still provides me with some material to work with, you know, because it's given me something that, you know, instead of tripping over a rock, I've tripped over a pearl, you know, it's taken me into a whole new place. So music does have a very transcendent quality. It speaks in beyond any language. I think that's why my concerts have worked, my solo concerts, is because it's past language. You know, I get asked quite often, you know, when you go to Germany, you go to France, you go to Italy, you go to wherever you go, aren't you concerned that people aren't going to understand what you're saying? And I'm never concerned about that because music's language is so vast, so broad, so embracing. I discovered my family Bible, I think, when I was about 8. No, I got my first Bible when I was 7. I learned my first Bible verse when I was 6, you know, by heart, which was, what was it? It's in the book of Matthew. Yeah, it'll come to me. My father's father was a Baptist minister. I grew up in the Episcopal Church. When I was 16, I wanted to become a monk. I was very attracted to the life of quiet, structure, Very much attracted to it. And pretty much gave up the idea of becoming a priest when I was about 24, 25, I think. Which was timely because 2 years later I decided that I was a singer and started working as a singer. So it's probably a good thing I didn't go hide off in a monastery somewhere. Though I'm still a very quiet guy and I love the scriptures. I still read the Bible through, over and over and over again, because you always find things there, that you hadn't seen before. I could read the same verse 1,000 times, but the 1,001st time I read it, I'll find something in it that I hadn't seen before. When I go to church, I usually attend an Episcopal church. I don't get to church much because of my traveling and all. I'd love to be able to sing in a church choir, but I don't think I'd make the rehearsals. We were rehearsing in a church, and we started talking about how, the masculine gender is so prominent in Scripture. And I think that night I went home and I wrote Psalm 23 as part of an exercise, because at that particular time in my life, I started the day off by writing. That was my morning meditation, I guess. And this tune was just there. I just wrote it. And I put it in the feminine because of the discussion that we had had about, men are just everywhere in the Bible, And I don't know, it just seemed to make sense. People forget, a father's love, and then there's a mother's love, which complements the father's love, and the father's love complements the mother's love, and they they fit together, nicely. So that's why I wrote it. Everything affects my spiritual journey. Everything does. Every day you make the decision, regardless of what you're doing, to choose life, choose blessings or choose cursings, or choose life or choose death, as the Bible talks about. So at every juncture, you have a choice. So everything becomes a spiritual exercise. In the first 5 books of the Bible, which is called the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, it's all about the law of God, the law of the new Israelites. They've come out of Egypt and now they're establishing a new society. If a person studies those books, you'll recognize that the 10 Commandments, for example, are not only religious laws, there's civil laws, there's social laws, which basically says, in order to have a really good relationship with other people, you must first have a really good relationship with God, who will teach you how to get along with other people, So everyday life is a spiritual experience, because every day you're making a decision whether you're going to choose life or not. Unfortunately, there is such a thing as a very narrow view of Christ. When I'm on the road, I have my televisions removed from my room because I don't want to watch the news. I don't want to read a newspaper, because there's this thing that I call, and this is just me, media Christianity. The only time the media, most of the time, not the only time, but most of the time, when we're talking about the Christian faith, it's always the extreme faction of it, the weirdos, the people who are angry and bitter. Now, angry and Christian don't go together. They don't. It's an oxymoron. You can't be an angry Christian. I'm hoping that people will come to identify that a spiritual life is deeply important. It's deeply important. I believe that there is that people should take steps toward healing themselves whenever whenever they first open up their eyes in the morning, they should be thinking about, how can I have a better day today than yesterday? How can I be more of a success spiritually today than I was yesterday? I like to think of the word step, S-T-E-P. Healing begins with the spirit, trickles down to the thoughts, which changes our emotions, which comes out of our bodies physically. Our bodies manifest our emotions, which in turn are manifested by our thoughts, which in turn are manifested by the spirit. So we can all work on those 4 things concurrently, but if you're going to work on any one of them, you need to start with the spirit. So regardless of their faith, regardless of their religion, because religion can be very confining. I don't really think of myself as a religious person per se, but more a spiritual person who follows Christ, who follows Jesus as my spiritual master. Unfortunately, we think that there are religious things and there are unreligious things. To me, and I read this somewhere and I thought it was beautiful, just being is a religious experience. It's a spiritual experience. Just being is holy. That's the thing that we forget because we spend most of our time on our physical selves, our bodies. When our bodies are just simply containers, or our bodies are temples for the spirit.